They tell you that death is the great equalizer, the final stop. But the Romans, in their terrible wisdom, knew better. They knew of a fate where death was a luxury, a state of being where you still breathed, still felt pain, still saw the sun, but you were no longer you. You were a thing, a tool with a voice. Instrumentum vocale. This is not a story about hardship. It is a story about erasure. The journey into a hell so profound, many considered it a fate worse than death itself. This is the story of how a Roman slave was made. It begins not in the marbled halls of Rome, but in the mud and blood of a conquered land. Imagine a forest in Gaul, a village in Germania, a sun-scorched port in Greece. One moment you have a name, a family, a future, and next, there is only the shattering sound of a Roman legion's shield wall, the smell of fire, and the cold iron of a manacle closing around your wrist. You are not a person anymore. You are pre-despoils of war. The march is the first filter. Days blur into weeks under a merciless sun or freezing rain. The weak are left to die on the road, their bodies food for wolves. Their journey ends there. Yours does not. This is not mercy, it is economics. You are worth more alive. You arrive at a slave market, a place like the Greco Stadium in Rome. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, fear, and expensive perfume. You are stripped naked, your body prodded, and examined like livestock. Your teeth, your muscles, your scars, every part of you is inspected for its utility. A plaque is hung around your neck, the titulus. It lists your origin, your skills, any known defects. It is your new identity. A chalk mark on your feet signifies you are fresh off the boat, imported goods. The auctioneer's voice rings out, a detached, booming sound that seals fates in a single sentence. He doesn't sell a man, he sells a set of skills, strong back, good for the minds. Can read and write Greek. A fine tutor for a lady. No tongue will keep your secrets safe. Buyers circle you, their eyes cold, calculating. They don't see a human, they see an investment. And then, a finger points. A price is named. A deal is struck. The moment the coins exchange hands is the true moment of death. Your old name, the one your mother gave you, turns to ash in your memory. Your past is a ghost. Your future belongs to the man who just bought you. You have been sold. Your price has been paid. Your life is over, and your servitude has just begun. The price has been paid. The name has been erased. What remains is a shell, a vessel waiting to be filled with a new purpose. But in the Roman world, not all servitude was created equal. For a newly bought slave, the path forward splintered into 3 distinct possibilities, each a unique circle of hell, each with its own price in blood, sweat, and spirit. The first, and perhaps the most feared, was a sentence to the mines. Damnati and metale, condemned to the metal. This was not work, it was a slow, grinding execution. Deep beneath the earth, in suffocating darkness, broken only by the flickering flame of an oil lamp, you would spend your life. The air, thick with toxic dust, would turn your lungs to stone. Your world would shrink to the rhythm of the hammer, the bite of the pickaxe, and the constant gnawing fear of a tunnel collapse. There were no days or nights, only shifts, no seasons, only the endless damp cold. Here, a slave's life expectancy was measured in months, not years. The empire's glittering gold, its strong iron, its shining silver ore were refined from the broken bodies and extinguished souls of men like you. To be sent to the mines was to know you would never again see the sun. The second path led to the roaring arena, to the gladiator schools, the ludus. Here, your body was not ground down, but forged into a weapon. You were given better food, medical care, and trained by the finest masters of combat. It was a gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. Your life, once worthless, was now a commodity for public spectacle. You learned to kill with grace and efficiency, to the sound of a roaring crowd. Every victory brought a temporary reprieve, a fleeting taste of glory. But every sunrise brought the shadow of death closer. You fought not for freedom, but for the entertainment of your masters, the very people who owned your life. You could become a champion, a living legend whispered about in the streets of Rome, but a legend is still a slave, and in the arena, every legend eventually bleeds. The third circle of hell was the quietest, and perhaps the most insidious, the great patrician domus, the villa of a wealthy master. Here there was no back-breaking labor or daily threat of violent death. There was gilded silence, opulent servitude. You could be a tutor, a cook, a musician, or a personal attendant, but this proximity to power came with its own terror. You were a ghost in someone else's life, privy to their darkest secrets, yet utterly invisible. Your existence was subject to the whims of your master. A spilled glass of wine, a misunderstood word, a moment of jealousy from the lady of the house Cine could result in a brutal punishment, or being sold off to the mines you so narrowly escaped. In the arena, your enemy was in front of you. In the villa, the enemy was everywhere and nowhere. It was a life of constant, suffocating anxiety, a psychological prison with invisible bars. The mines, the arena, or the villa. A swift death, a glorious death, or a living death. Three fates, decided by the flip of a coin and the needs of an empire. For the slave, it was never a choice. It was simply the next chapter in a story written by someone else. Whether in the suffocating dark of the mines, the blood-soaked sand of the arena, or the gilded cage of a villa, a slave's body was owned. But the Romans, masters of pragmatism and power, knew that controlling the body was not enough. True, unbreakable servitude required something far more sinister. It required the breaking of the mind. The first and most fundamental tool was the loss of identity, a process that began at the market but was perfected in daily life. You were no longer Brennus or Darius. You were given a new, often generic or even mocking name: Fugitivus if you were caught running, Peregrinus if you were foreign. This new name was a constant, verbal reminder of your status. You were not who you were. You were what your master decided you are. The second tool was isolation. Slaves from the same tribe or region were deliberately separated. This prevented alliances, conspiracies, and the comfort of a shared language or culture. You were surrounded by people, yet utterly alone, an island of despair in a sea of strange faces. This loneliness was a weapon, designed to make you more dependent on the one person who held absolute power over you, your master. Then came the physical discipline. This was not random violence, it was calculated psychological warfare. The whip, the brand, the stockstees were not just tools of punishment, but instruments of terror. The public flogging of one slave served as a brutal lesson to 100 others. The sizzling mark of a branding iron on your flesh was a permanent declaration of ownership, a mark that screamed "I belong to another" to anyone who saw it. It was a scar on the soul, mirrored on the skin. But the most powerful tool of all was the calculated use of hope. Not the hope of freedom, but a smaller, more treacherous kind. A slave who performed well might receive a slightly larger food ration, a less strenuous task, a word of praise. This tiny flicker of mercy was the most effective chain of all. It created a hierarchy among the oppressed, fostering jealousy and competition rather than unity. It made you strive to please your tormentor, to see a moment of kindness in the face of your God. It was a system designed to make you police yourself, to crush the very idea of rebellion before it could form in your mind, by erasing your past, isolating you from your peers, terrorizing your body, and poisoning you with false hope. The Roman system of slavery aimed for the ultimate prize, not just obedience, but acceptance of your own subjugation. It aimed to make you forget you were ever free, and to believe you deserved the chains you wore. The mind is broken. The body is owned. The past is a ghost. Is this the end? For millions it was. They lived and died as property, their names and stories swallowed by the silence of history. But even in the deepest darkness, the human spirit can sometimes find a crack to grow towards the light. For a Roman slave, there were only two paths out of servitude, and both demanded the ultimate price. The first path was manumission, freedom, the act of a master releasing a slave from bondage. It was the dream whispered in the slave quarters, the ultimate reward. It could be earned through decades of loyal service, by purchasing one's own freedom with a scraped-together peculum, a slave's personal savings, or it could be granted on a master's whim, or in his will. But this freedom was a fragile, conditional thing. A freedman, a libertus, was never truly equal. They bore the stigma of their past forever. They often owed duties and services to their former master, a golden chain that replaced the iron one. They could own property, they could marry, but they could never hold the highest offices or erase the memory of the brand on their soul. It was a half-life, a shadow of the full citizenship they could see but never grasp. Freedom was not a gift, it was just a longer leash. The second path out was far quicker, more brutal, and for many, more absolute: rebellion. The path of Spartacus. It was the rarest and most desperate of choices. To rise up was to challenge the full, terrifying might of the Roman Republic. It was to choose a near-certain, agonizing death for a brief, glorious taste of defiance. To rebel was to reclaim your name, if only for a moment. It was to choose how you would die rather than how you would live. Most rebellions were crushed. swiftly and mercilessly. The punishment for a rebel was the most shameful and horrifying death the Romans could devise: crucifixion. Thousands of crosses would line the roads to Rome, a forest of tormented bodies, a stark warning to any other slave who dared to dream of defiance. This was the final, terrible price of a Roman slave: a lifetime of servitude in exchange for half freedom in old age, or a few moments of glorious rebellion in exchange for a death of unimaginable agony. Most, however, never had to choose. Their price was paid in full through a lifetime of silent, anonymous labor that built the columns, paved the roads, and harvested the grain of the most powerful empire the world had ever known. They were the living dead who built a civilization. Their names are gone, their voices are silent, but the echo of their price, the cost of an empire, can still be heard if you listen closely enough to the stones of Rome.